Hello, class. Today we're going to be learning about the legislative branch.
All right, so we're going to talk about Congress, the House, and the Senate. So the House of Representatives and the Senate, that was designed as a bicameral system, and this was a major debated issue in the Constitutional Convention. So out of the Constitutional Convention is where we had the bicameral system created to make the large and the small states happy, with the House making the large states happy because it's going to be based on population, and the Senate making the small states happy because ultimately each state is represented equally. Okay, so in the House and the Senate, there's 435 members in the House, and it's all based on population of the state. So every 10 years when we take our census, we're going to determine if a state is losing or gaining members in the House. And as you can see, in 2010, the population of Illinois decreased from 2000 to 2010, and Illinois lost one member of Congress. Right now, as we go into the next census of 2020, Illinois looks like we're going to possibly lose another member of the House because our population has decreased again. So as you can look at this map, this was from a couple years ago, but this is what we're estimating is going to happen after the 2020 census. The states in pink or purple are going to each lose a member of Congress. States in green are looking to gain at least one member. And then a state like Texas, population has grown so much, they may even gain 2 members of the House. So that's a big deal because that's ultimately power your state's gaining or losing in the House of Representatives. All right, in the Senate, there's going to be 100 total members because it's equally represented with 2 per state. So with 50 states, that's simple math. 50 times 2 equals
100.
100. Good job, Cam. So there's 100 members in the Senate. All right, qualifications. So these are maybe those things you remember from your Constitution test back in 8th grade. So how old do you have to be a member of the House? 25. You have to be a citizen for 7 years and a resident of the state you're elected in. The Senate's a little older. You got to be 30. You got to be a citizen of the U.S. for 9 years and also a resident of the state that you're elected in. So one common qualification is you have to show proof that you live in the state you're being elected in. You probably own property, and more importantly, you pay taxes. The cool thing about U.S. is you don't have to be a natural born citizen to qualify to be in these positions. All right. Yes, to be president of the United States, you have to be a natural born citizen, but any naturalized citizen, any natural born citizen can run for Senate, can run for the House, as long as you match those qualifications of being a citizen for 7 or 9 years. For the House, you serve for a 2-year term, which is kind of interesting because every 2 years you're up for election. So it seems like as soon as you've won your election, you're already worrying about getting reelected. But that means every single election is important because you have 435 members who are making the laws that are up for election every 2 years. So 2020, we have election with the president. 2022, we're going to have no presidential election, but 435 members in the House are going to be up for election. So those midterm elections, as we call them, in between the presidential elections are very important because you have all 435 members of the House running for the positions. In the Senate, they run for office every 6 years. So there's 1/3 of the members that are elected every 2 years. So that means that we don't have all 100 senators being up for election every 2 years. All right, so about 1/3 of them. So roughly 33 of the 100 senators will be up for election, which is good. That creates some stability. So you don't have 100 brand new senators. You're going to have some senators that have been there for a while, know how the system works, and then also some rookies that are in there for the first time, and they can kind of all gel together and it hopefully work a little more smoothly. All right, so when you go to vote, hopefully this year, like most of you guys will, you're going to see some of these names probably on your ballots. All right, depending on what street you live on, where your physical address is of your house, you're either going to have probably District 11, Bill Foster, or you're going to be in District 14 with Lauren Underwood. District 16 is where I live out here in Shanahan, and my representative is Adam Kinzinger. So based on where you live, your physical address of your house is going to be the district you live in. So if we zoom in here on a map that makes it a little closer to where we're at, Joliet West High School is in District 11, which would be Bill Foster. Some of you guys might live on the west side of it might be County Line or something like that, where Lauren Underwood's district starts. So you will have either one of them. Bill Foster's office is literally right down the street at Black and Larkin Avenue. And you can call, you can email, you can probably even stop in there to try to set up appointments if you really wanted to meet with your congressman. And if there's certain issues you want addressed or certain things you want done in the city of Joliet or the surrounding areas, that's the person you would go to within the federal government. Okay, so these people are part of the community. Adam Kinzinger literally lives in a neighborhood around mine. My daughter Cam and I have seen him at Jewel shopping, and you say hey to him. He's just a normal guy that's part of Congress. All right, but he's making the laws. Lauren Underwood's making laws. Bill Foster's making the laws. So these people are very important, and we have to know a couple things: who they are, obviously, but what are they up to? What laws are they passing or not passing? So we know whether or not we want to vote for them in the next elections. All right, so these districts are really odd shaped, okay? In this term we call this is gerrymandering. So ultimately what they're trying to do is draw these borders of these districts in ways that are going to benefit one group or the other, most likely the Democrats or the Republicans. So you can see on this district here with District 17, typically, if we live in more urban settings, you're going to see more Democrat voters. More rural settings oftentimes will be more Republican voters. So you see how District 17 comes and it kicks out around Peoria here. All right, so Peoria is going to probably be more of an urban setting, probably more likely to see some Democrat voters in that area. So you see that District 17 kind of gerrymanders into that area to make sure they pick up those Democrat votes. All right, same thing if you look at, District 13 here, kind of kicks out just around the city of Springfield. All right, and what this is going to allow to happen is District 18 to probably always stay Republican, and District 13 maybe to be more Democrat election to election. Okay, not that it's guaranteed that's always going to be Republican or Democrat, but that's why they draw these borders in those ways to try to keep one political party from holding the office. It's exciting stuff, isn't it? No, I didn't think so. It's important to know, though. All right, so we're going to do a little activity. You guys are going to have a chance for some extra credit. I'll post a game link, an online game that you guys can play to try to better understand how gerrymandering works. But these little bar graphs here kind of show you that if you try to break it down into 50-50 or a perfect split, it should be pretty easy. If you have 60% of your district is Republican and 40% is Democrat, just break it down so that you always have, 60% of the places you vote are going to be voted by Republicans and 40% by Democrats or vice versa. But instead, they like to do this and draw them like number 3 and draw these zigzags kind of going all back and forth. And then all of a sudden you have a group that's not really the group that has the majority of the voters winning the majority of the elections. So it's not necessarily getting a true representation of what the who the voters really are when it comes to political parties. All right, the Senate's a little different. So the districts, you're representing in a district of people based on an address. All right, so the senators are going to represent the entire state. So they're trying to get it voted in by both rural and urban areas. So they have to think about what's best for the entire state of Illinois, whether it's people in urban areas like Chicago or out in the farmlands of Bloomington or out in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. They have to look at all aspects. Okay, a member of the House of Representatives is just focusing on that smaller area of just the Joliet area, just the Shorewood area, just the Channahon area, wherever your physical address is. So the senators have a little bit larger responsibility because they're representing more people as a whole. Okay. So when we say, members of Congress are either in Congress or out of Congress, in session, out of session, on recess, there's all kinds of terms we're going to use, not recess like you have, but recess meaning that they're back in their home states and their home districts working. All right. So like Bill Foster, whose office is right down the street from Joliet West. If you look at the little calendar here, he's going to be in DC working on any of the dates that are blue or purple. Any dates that are not blue or purple, he's back in his office there at Black and Larkin, working within the district, talking to people within the district, figuring out what he needs to do when he goes back to DC and is working on legislation and passing laws. All right, so they spend a lot of time in DC, back in their home state, back and forth. Just about every weekend they're on a plane going back and forth between DC and their home districts, home cities, and states. So let's say it's a busy schedule. All right, you got to definitely want that lifestyle to have to do that every weekend. All right, so once we have an election, so after the 2018 election, this is what our Congress looks like. So you can see that out of the 435 members in the House, the Democrats have the majority with 235 to the Republicans 197. And then after the 2018 election in the Senate, the Republicans took the majority with 53 out of the 100, and the Democrats have 47. So this is where the term majority and minority party comes from. When your party has more than the other party in the House or in the Senate, you're considered the majority party. And what that really is referencing is you have more power in the particular part of Congress, and you're more likely your party can get things passed when you have the majority of the people from your party in House or in the Senate. Now the trifecta is if you get the House, the Senate, and the president are all of the same party, very easy then to get legislation done, bills passed, and laws written and put into place. When you have it like it looks there, where you have the Democrats in charge of the House and the Republicans in charge of the Senate, you kind of have more butting of heads because now you don't have both with or one party with the majority of both. All right, in the House and the Senate, you have a person who's in charge. So in the House, we call that person the Speaker of the House, and currently that person is Nancy Pelosi. Very important position because not only are you in line to be the President of the United States if something happened to the President and the Vice President, but you are the one that controls what's going on in the House. What bills are they going to be voting on? What legislation are they going to focus on? In the Senate, the boss is always going to be the Vice President. So our current Vice President is Mike Pence, and he is in charge of the Senate. And the reason for that is you have 100 senators, so there is a chance you could have a 50-50 vote where something wouldn't get passed because it's a tie. So the job of the senator as the presiding officer or the boss of the Senate, the vice president would come in and make that deciding vote if it was a 50-50 split. So you'd be voted 51-50 in favor or against whatever he decides. So you do have members of the House and the vice president who would be in charge of those positions. All right, when you are elected to Congress, you are put into a committee. So these committees are ultimately going to be looking at ideas that might become a law. So if it's I had to pause for a second. Our dogs went a little crazy. All right, so the organization in Congress is, when you're elected to Congress, the House and the Senate, you're going to be put into a committee of your expertise. So if you were in the military, like my Congressman Kinzinger, you'd probably be in the Armed Forces Committee. If you had something to do with farming, you'd probably be in an Agriculture Committee. All right, so you're going to be put in a committee. So you'll study the bill to identify, is it worth even voting on to become a law? Now, most ideas, they don't even go into the form of becoming a law because they'll die in committee, it's called. Because the committee will study it and they'll say this is going to be too expensive or this is just not a good idea. So we're not even going to go forward with it. And ultimately, the bill dies in committee. If it passes committee, that's when it could eventually be signed by the president and be new law of the land. All right, so when you're in Congress, we have our expressed and our implied powers. All right, so the Congress has powers that are clearly listed in the Constitution, which we call our express powers, or enumerated, which ultimately means numbered in the Constitution or listed in the Constitution. Implied powers are a little different. Those are the powers that say, well, because we are given the power to do A, we also get to do B. All right, and this is where we call it our elastic we've talked about, where it's like a rubber band stretching, all right, to expand their powers for a period of time or permanently, depending on what the issue is. All right, so the example you might see here is, let's look at this one here. So in the Constitution, Congress is given the power to raise and regulate an army and navy. So because they get to do that, they're going to say this implies that if need be, we have the right to draft people into the armed services. So on the left there, you have the power that's clearly stated in the Constitution. On the right, that's like the rubber band. Well, because we have the power to do one thing, it stretches our power to allow us to do the other thing. All right, special powers. So things that just the House or just the Senate can do. All right, so special powers in the House is they can bring impeachment charges against a member of Congress, a Supreme Court judge, the president, and then the Senate is who acts as the actual jury in a trial. All right, so if they want to get rid of someone, the House will actually charge someone with impeachment. And if they say yes to that charge, then the Senate would bring up the actual trial and decide if they're going to kick that person out. So it's 2 steps. So if you've been paying attention, like we talked about, with President Trump, you've had the House said, yes, we want to kick him out of the presidency. We believe he did stuff that was illegal. So the House voted yes to impeach him. So he was impeached by the House, but when the trial went through the Senate, the senators voted no to not kick him out of office. All right, so it takes both parts to get that accomplished. All right, the other special powers in the House is if there was a tie or no majority in the Electoral College of a presidential election, the members of the House, the 435 members of the House, would vote to decide who the next president is. They also have to start all revenue or tax bills. So if there's ever a bill that's going to come up to increase or decrease our taxes that we pay at the federal level, the House of Representatives would have to decide whether or not that bill would go forward. In the Senate, they have to ratify treaties. So one of the jobs we'll learn about the president is the president's got to go out and act as a diplomat, all right, chief diplomat with other nations. So working with this leader, that leader, come up with trade deals or trade treaties, war going on or something. It can be a military treaty. So that's great. The president gets to create those treaties, but it's going to be up to the Senate whether or not they actually pass it and agree to it. So checks and balances there. The president has the power to do one thing, but the Senate's going to have to check the power of the president to make sure they agree with it. Okay, and there's another checks and balance example is when the president decides he wants certain people to be in positions of power, the Senate has to approve those positions. So here's a list of some of those positions. You got the Secretary of State, foreign ambassadors, attorney general, Supreme Court justices. Those are all people that the president gets to pick who they are, but the Senate has to approve them. Okay, otherwise the president could really take advantage of that power. Now, some groups that are not part of this list are his advisors. The advisors have to be people the president can trust. All right, so these aren't people that have to be approved by the Senate. They just have to be chosen by the president, and because they have to be people that don't have any political connections to other members of Congress. All right, so they have to work together though on these things. So I'll put those up there so you can see that these are not things that the House or the Senate do on their own. These are some of the major things that if we want to declare war, pass a bill, vote on amendments, decide to print more money, these are things that both the House and the Senate have to work together on and do together. They can't do it individually. Also, they'd have to override a presidential veto. So if the president vetoes a bill, so it does not become law, but Congress says, you know what, we really feel like this is important for the country, and the House and the Senate agree together to override that presidential veto, they can still make a law or a bill into a law, even if the president doesn't agree to it. And that is it. So if you guys go through those notes, you can go back and watch this video anywhere else to kind of pause it at times if there's something you missed. These are all the things we have to know for the legislative branch to prepare for our Constitution test. So double down on it, watch it once or twice to make sure you understand it all. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Say bye.
Bye.